So I'm a uncommon Michigander. My father immigrated to Detroit, Michigan from Alexandria, Egypt. He was the eldest of 6, born and raised to the wisest, most intelligent person I've ever met in my whole life. And that is my grandmother, my Teta Soad. He was raised by her. She was the 9th of 14, never got to go to school. And his father, who sold vegetables in a fish market. And he earned an academic scholarship to come to Wayne State University, and that's how we became American. He met and married my mother very quickly. They did 3 things: met, conceived, and got divorced. And so I was born, and then my father met and married my stepmom, Jackie, daughter of the American Revolution. So I grew up in this really interesting home in Michigan. Now, the first time I ever saw my father cry, I knew exactly what had happened. I was about 13 years old. I was coming downstairs, and I see my father wiping tears away from his eyes. And I knew exactly at that moment that his mother had died, because that's the only thing I could have imagined that would have driven him to tears. His mother, as I told you, illiterate homemaker, 9th of 14, she gave birth to 8 of 6 of whom survived. 2 of them died before their first birthdays. They were an aunt and uncle I never got to meet, a sister and a brother my father watched pass before he turned 5 years old. The second time I saw my father cry, I was interviewing him for my podcast, America Dissected. And I was doing an episode about infant mortality. And I knew my father had some experience with this, but he had never talked about it. And so I pulled out my microphone. I said, would you be willing to share your experience of this? And he tells me about his experience as a 1-year-old losing his sister, Badriya. And she was really sick, and they took her to the hospital, and she never came back. 4 years later, he has a brother, Jabir, has a really bad GI illness. He's about 9 months. He vomits on the carpet. And my grandmother says, we're going to take him to the hospital. And my father goes crazy. He tries to hold them back. He tries to bar the door. They go to the hospital. And when they came back, Jabir was not with them. And for the next 2 days, he guarded that carpet that his brother had vomited on, because it was the last thing he had of his little brother. And as he was telling me these stories that I had never heard as like a full-blown adult, I could see the tears rolling down his eyes. It was a trauma he had learned to live with, locked away for a very, very long time. Later on, when we were doing our podcast, I got to interview my grandparents, Jan and Judy Johnson. And just on a side note, it is a wild thing when you have one grandmother, Soad, who was illiterate and raised 6 kids in a 1-bedroom apartment in Alexandria, and another, Judy, who herself is a daughter of the American Revolution, who trained as a nurse in Flint, Michigan, and raised her 3 kids. Having to try and explain one grandmother to the other is a very uncommon kind of experience, but it does teach you a lot about the things that are similar between grandmothers. When they kiss you on the forehead, they make your favorite meal, and they tell you that they love you, that it's done with the same love. And I remember sitting down with my grandma Judy, who herself was a nurse, and asking about the experience of lining up to get the Salk vaccine against polio. And I asked, weren't your parents so worried about the side effects? And she looks at me, she was like, of polio or of the vaccine? And it's all I really needed to hear. Because everybody in that generation knew somebody who had had some feature of their lives robbed from them because of polio. And so the idea that there was a vaccine that could actually prevent you from getting that disease, of course, you were going to line your children up to get that vaccination, come what may, because you knew what polio could do. Fast forward, we have lived through, I don't have to tell you, a pandemic. And you would think that living through this pandemic that decimated for a moment the economy, that destroyed our lives and livelihoods in ways that we still have PTSD from, even though we don't talk about, you would think that coming out of this pandemic, we would do absolutely everything we could to protect ourselves from the next one. But I think if you talk to any public health official, they will tell you that we are less prepared now than we ever have been, in large part because rather than actually deal with the circumstances of what we got wrong, we allowed this pandemic to sow a level of and distrust in a series of technologies that have saved generations of people. And I shared those experiences from my own family to offer you the contrast. My grandparents got to wait in line to get a Salk vaccine. My stepmom and her siblings all got vaccinated against basic vaccine-preventable diseases. And on my father's side in Alexandria, Egypt, not 50, 60 years ago, 70 years ago now, I had 2 of my aunts and uncles pass away because they never got those vaccines. How do we get to a point where trust in public health, trust in vaccines is so low? I'm an epidemiologist, so hazard me the opportunity to break down this situation with a bit of a model. We've got an HHS secretary in RFK Jr., who literally is the guy who goes swimming in Schitt's Creek. So the idea that he's ill-equipped for the job, that goes without saying. But he has made a career out of and disinforming the public before he ever ascended to the highest office in public health in this country. But in epidemiology, we break models down. We understand that it's not just about the pathogen, RFK Jr. It is also about the host and about the environment. And I think it's important for us to be asking some fairly basic questions about the hosts and the environment to understand why and disinformation go so viral. The metaphor itself speaks to the movement of viruses. So how does this spread? What is it about us in this moment, in the environment in which we live, that makes it so easy to question very basic things that our generations before us understood in their gut would protect them? I think, number one, it's that we as a society have lost a level of trust in institutions that I don't know how we get back. I want to just offer you this experience as somebody who spent the pandemic trying to convince people to get vaccinated. You would go into a community and you would say, hey, the vaccine is here for you. It is free. It's available. Go, line up and take it. You can protect yourself from a very serious disease that is affecting our lives. And they would look at you and say, what about my insulin? To which you would say, yeah, no, I get insulin is really important, but, and you'd have to stop for a second and say, yeah, what about your insulin? Because imagine this. All of a sudden, I'm offering you a vaccine for free against a disease you don't have, when you've been struggling to get medications for a disease you know you have. Now, all of a sudden, this thing that didn't exist a year ago, I'm giving to you for free? You're going to be a little bit suspect. Give me my insulin first, then we can talk about this vaccine. Because I know I have diabetes. I know how much my insulin costs, and I know I need it. And all of you all, public health do-gooders, didn't seem to care too much about solving that problem for me. And so we live in a system where we constantly, consistently allow the way we incentivize access to basic resources to undercut very basic logic for people. Yes, the vaccine was free. It was a miracle of modern science. And yet the fact that we have allowed corporations to profiteer by raising the prices of insulin ever higher undercut the basic access to that vaccine. We talk about mistrust in the context of movement of information, which I'll get to. But let's not forget that the structures of our society sow a lot of mistrust too. Let's talk a little bit about the environment. If you were to pick up your phone, which all of you I know where it is, because I know that your mind will tell you where it is because you have an indelible connection to that phone by way of dopamine circuits that have been reinforced over and over and over again. Anybody here not know where their phone is? I know exactly where my phone is. Just touching it gives me comfort. But if you're going to go on your phone right now, you're probably going to use an app made by maybe 3, 4 companies. Each of them will show you a set of information that is about doing one of 2 things. About reifying a pre-existing sense of what the world is, who's right and who's wrong, or showing you the worst of the people who you assume to be counterposed to that perspective on the world. You either want to look at somebody dunking on somebody you hate, or You want to look at somebody who's saying exactly what it is you believe so you feel a little bit better. That's the way we interact with our algorithms. None of this is a real smattering of the information environment in the world. All of it is collated and curated to keep us looking. Why? Because that comfort or that outrage, they're bait. And that's the only way that they can keep monetizing our eyeballs and eardrums to sell us things we probably don't need. And yet, if that's the way we move information, we transact with the world, ask yourself how easy it is to show somebody something that undercuts basic trust in the systems and the people who are actually trying to do good. It is way easier to show one person doing one bad thing to make a broader argument about the world being an untrustworthy place than it is to build that trust in the first place. The environment in which we are being bombarded itself undercuts trust. It's undercut trust in medicine, undercut trust in media, undercut trust in politicians, and as a politician, you probably shouldn't trust politicians. But democracy is kind of the best thing we've got. And so I want to end here. We are walking into a world of AI. We're walking into a world where it becomes easier to make false information that is compelling, that can capture those very broken dopamine circuits in all of our minds and move us to believe things that may not be what's best for us personally or what's best for us collectively. And in the era of AI, my question to us is this: how do we address the mis and disincentives that have made our systems so fragile? The mis and disincentives that allow huge corporations to leave people without the insulin they know they need, even while we're providing them the COVID vaccines that we know they need. How do we address the mis and disincentives on which social media was born and bred that leave us giving away the most powerful and potent resource in our whole lives, our attention, for free, disconnecting us from the things that we really truly believe in to show us things that tell us we're connected but leave us mistrustful of the world around us? And then how do we actually build public service and a politics that is worth actually investing in? So I'm gonna leave it there. And I know I don't have an answer for you. I actually have several answers for you, but I'm not gonna tell you them because I'm not politics mode right now. But I'm looking forward to questions because I do think that in a space like this, you all are building and designing the future. And if we continue down these same incentives, I worry a lot about whose uncle and whose aunt folks might not get to meet because we turned our backs against basic tech that we've had for decades. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Sorry to put you into politics mode, but I am curious to hear if there's a particular policy that starts to answer the question.
Thank you for asking.
That's part of your platform.
So I wrote a book. Hilariously enough, I was supposed to come talk about it actually here. I wrote a book about an epidemic of insecurity that published in March of 2020. Which, if you're ever planning a book tour, don't do it when there's a pending pandemic, which as an epidemiologist, I should have seen coming. And then I wrote a second book the next year called Medicare for All, A Citizen's Guide. And right now in our healthcare system, we like to think of ourselves as the customer. But let's say I go to the Eastern market and I want to buy kohlrabi because it sounds cool. I don't even know how to eat it, but like it sounds cool. And so I go to one artisan. I say, I would like a bushel of kohlrabi. Like I know what I'm doing. And he's like, it's $2.99. I go to the next artisan. He says it's $1.99. I'm like, okay, well, what's the difference? He's like, mine is organically grown from manures for cows that got massages. And this is the best one. And I'm like, well, I mean kohlrabi, so I'll eat good, right? So I buy the $2.99 because, of course, this is just conspicuous consumption at this point. And I buy it. I tender my money and I get the kohlrabi. I say this because I want us to have in our mind what a normal customer interaction is. Let's say I start clutching my chest and I'm like, oh, what do you guys do? Somebody calls. You say that awfully slowly. Somebody calls. All right. And I get rushed off to a hospital, okay? And I'm sitting there, even though I'm a doctor, I'm like, so doc, what are you gonna do? He's like, you're gonna shut up and you're gonna do the thing that I want. I was like, well, I didn't wanna go here. I know I'm like a couple miles away from Johns Hopkins, and can you just take me to Hopkins? He's like, no, shut up. You're going to get the care here, right? And so in the end, right, I get the care, and then a bill goes from whom to whom? From the hospital I didn't even want to go to my insurance company. So ask yourself, in that example, I am the reason a financial transaction happened between an insurance company and a hospital. Am I the customer or am I the kohlrabi? And I just don't think I want to be kohlrabi. I don't think any of us want to. And so I think what we need to do is address the profit motive on one side of that incentive set, which is at the payer side. Because here's the thing about insurance, it adds no value. It does not innovate anything. The whole plan is to collectivize our risk pool, right, such that you are insured against the risk of getting sick. The problem is, though, our deductible on average is $4,000. If you're doing the math, the median family making $80,000 a year is paying more than a single paycheck just to get the healthcare they thought they already paid for. It'd be like turning on Netflix. You're about to watch the season finale of Bridgerton, which I swear is a show I've never watched. And then all of a sudden, right, boom, $19.99. You're like, I already paid though. You're like, your deductible though, right? We understand that that's not right. That system though is the reason we have a collective $225 billion in medical debt in this country, which is more than the GDP of half of US states. If we could provide high quality, guaranteed, low margin health insurance for everyone, the rest of this could stay private, where all the innovation happens, right? So guaranteeing people health care through, people call it single payer, people call it Medicare for all, a lot of different names for it. But if we could do that, I think we would have a far better system. And guess what? Because no matter who you are, you're getting the insulin you need. And so if we're taking care of the basic needs you know you have, it becomes a lot easier in moments of crisis to communicate the needs that we need you to understand you have.
So I'm not sure when you said insecurity if you meant like insecure access to resources or internal insecurity, but I'm curious how that plays into how you were looking at host virus and society at large.
Yeah, we're all walking around like, man, my butt's too big. No, look, what I mean by that is the chronic experience of feeling like you don't have enough and will lose what you have, right? It's more than just anxiety and it's more than poverty. Because even people with wealth in a system where we have very little safety net are worried about being one step away from losing it all. And so we're constantly operating from this acquisitive frame, which is to say, I gotta protect mine because nobody else is gonna protect mine, which leads to a whole bunch of really bad incentives in our political system. And so, in this book, I try to use an epidemiologic framework to identify what the implications of that are and to say that the only real way we deal with this is to take on a pretty radical empathy around that feeling and what we do about it. And I think a lot of the frameworks in which we've approached politics, sometimes, we fall into this like my side, your side, rather than being able to say, actually, like, what's actually bothering you? And what have people told you about why? Right? Because if everybody's feeling a certain pinch, then at the end of the day, it's very easy to believe that you don't have because somebody else has. So I've been to 58 cities now. I've done 103 public events across my state. You can go up to like Escanaba, which he'll tell you is a very small town in the Upper Peninsula, right? And you could also be in a church in Redford or in Detroit. And people say the same things. You literally could close your eyes and they're saying the exact same things. The problem is they don't know they're saying them. And they don't quite understand that we live under a system that has enabled that system to take from everybody. And so our lives just get harder and we all kind of wonder, where's it going? It must be going to somebody else. It makes it a lot easier for some politician to come around and say, well, we don't have because they have. You name the they, right? Black folks in the urban communities, white folks in the rural communities, immigrants, which is always the they, right? But all of that goes back to this notion of like, I don't have enough. And it just shouldn't be this hard.
Hi, thank you for being here. Again, sorry, drawing you back into the political discussion. I have a very self-serving question. I'm on our local school board in Rhode Island, in the community where my kids go to school. I have until midnight tonight to put forth ideas for what our legislative agenda should be for the coming year or two. Typically at the school board level, we advocate for things that are happening at our state, and being a very blue state, things usually work on our favor. But having myself just come out of USAID, I know that the context, and yeah, that's how I feel, that that the context of like being able to expect what's going to happen next is gone. And so I've been trying to push for, okay, how do we advocate from my school district to our advocacy group of school districts to then go to the state and to the federal level. So from your perspective, kind of running, what would you say, say are some of the most important things that we can expect or not maybe aren't expecting, that are outside of our sightlines, to worry that are going to harm our kids, our families, our communities, and affect their education, that, I could be putting out to Rhode Islanders to say, these are issues that are coming from the Fed that we need to be aware of?
That's a really big question.
I know, sorry.
Let me offer 4. The first is the thoughtless impact, or the thoughtless implementation of AI in the classroom. I think we cannot pretend that AI is not here, and we cannot pretend that our kids should not know how to use it. I think the question, though, is that, like all technology, there's this like overinvestment and then pullback. And I think with this one, we cannot take the risk of making too many mistakes. And I think thinking about that is really important. Number 2, we are watching an onslaught against the idea that America is a place built on ideals that is inclusive of everybody. And the worry that I have is that they are going to try and drive this into the curriculum, that America is a place with a certain kind of people, right? And that there are guests here. And unless we want to talk about like who's been staying at the hotel longer, right? Then I think we need to get honest about the risk of that and about how we protect against that. 3, I think where a lot of these Medicaid cuts are going to be the biggest and most profound are going to fall on children. In large part because families are going to have to make decisions about where they allocate resources that are going to fall hardest on kids. Second, a lot of the infrastructure that provides for both mental health and services for people with special needs in schools are paid for by Medicaid. And I think we are sometimes less focused on that because it sieves through a whole bunch of different little pockets of money, but that's going to fall profoundly on schools. And I think thinking about how to invest in protecting our most vulnerable kids at school is foundationally critical. And then lastly, I think we are going to have a glut of teachers. And I think that, when you tell a group of people, just think about this for a second. Imagine what it would mean for the teaching profession if we say, forgave college debt, gave people a $50,000 bonus for signing on, right? And invested in long-term pensions for them. What it would say about the dignity of a profession. We don't do that for teachers. You know who we do that for? ICE. I've literally just described the ICE signing package, which is insane, right? An agency that has like literally the budget higher than the FBI and the Marines. Can you imagine? Anyway, all of that is to say, I worry that especially in the age of AI, you're going to see just a mass walking away from the profession. And teachers do a lot of things that aren't just presenting information, right? Especially in an era where we underfund our schools in the first place. We ask them to be nurses. We ask them to be social workers. We ask them to be janitors. We ask them to be curators of classrooms, right? And I think thinking about how you invite teachers back to the profession and you make it a dignified profession are absolutely critical. I really appreciate your question. Thank you.
Big thank you to Abdul. Thanks, friend.